what's really hard for young guys in this day and age is that there's like so much friction that has built up. And where do they start?
Yeah.
You know, if they're having a really difficult time, do they start with trying to find a mentor? Do they start with therapy? Do they start with just going to the gym? Do they start with just getting some kind of hobby and trying to get more male friends? Because there's a lot of guys out there that would probably say that they don't have any male friends.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Emily and Todd Podcast. Today we're talking about men's mental health and why traditional therapy doesn't work for men. Before we get started, please remember to like and comment on this video as it does really help with the YouTube algorithm. Todd, this is a very serious, interesting topic. I think the piece that I was thinking about before talking about this today is that in general, I think that the stigma surrounding therapy has really decreased. Yes. But for some reason, we are still seeing a huge issue, especially for men's mental health. So what is it? Is what we're doing not working? And why do you think that is?
I think that there's a two-pronged approach to this. And the first is the stigma. I think for therapy is less stigmatized, but not as much for men still. So that's and then if you can get a man into therapy, the typical model is not helpful for him. And so then he deems it to not be worthwhile, and he usually will drop out of it if it's done ineffectively. And so a guy is not going to spend a lot of money and time on something that he deems to be worthless.
It makes sense. And in your experience, this is what I was curious about. I feel like a lot of men will go to therapy like with their woman, with their significant other for couples therapy. How frequently were you seeing guys in that kind of situation versus guys that were single and really just wanted individual therapy?
I would say that it was both.
Okay.
So I would say probably because I am a male therapist, I would get a lot of male clients more than a female therapist, which I honestly think was a good thing. So I have a fair amount of experience. I would say probably my caseload was like 70% male. So that's something that it's kind of unique to me. But for example, in my grad school class, I was 2 out of 100 as far as female to males.
Yeah.
So there's very few of us in the field, and it's something that we need more guys to be in the field because men can relate to other men in that setting a lot more than women can. It's just as far as how our brain works and what men value and what they are looking to get out of it.
Yeah. Do you think that that's just because they're more comfortable talking to another man? Or do you think your approach is different as a male therapist?
I think it's both. I think it starts that way because that's something where if I'm validating their feelings, it's coming from another guy, and it's something that they can connect with more versus a woman saying that, because women truly don't know what men experience, just like men don't know what women experience. And that's, one of the reasons the kind of gender wars are going on. Or you and I will jokingly talk about what a dad bod is because we're looking at things from a different perspective.
Right. Definitions can be very different from one gender to the next.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that when it comes to the therapeutic process, a guy is probably going to connect better with a guy, especially if that guy is able to walk him through the process of trying to fix or mend whatever problems are going on and be very solution-oriented versus feeling heard and validated.
Yeah, so definitely I see that, especially with the content that I do, right, is that I feel like I validate a lot of what men go through. But I feel like that's kind of all that women really need is sort of validation and to kind of talk it out with somebody else, right? And then because I feel like that way as a woman. Like oftentimes I don't even want solutions to be presented to me.
Yeah, of course not.
Until I've really, had time to just spill everything out and just vent it all.
Yes.
If you present a solution to me too early on, it's like, no, because it feels like I'm not getting my chance to vent then. You're cutting me off. Whereas a man thinks very differently.
Yes. Well, and that's the age-old issue between men and women typically, is that a woman will come and, have a really difficult day or have a, issue with a coworker or whatever. And you guys just want to vent and be heard. And you're not looking for solutions. You're just looking to, and so a guy really ideally should just kind of say, "Oh, that's terrible," that type of thing.
Yeah, hold back the solutions.
Yeah, hold back the solutions. And so, a lot of times when I worked with women in that setting, it was a lot easier than guys for a couple different reasons. One is because of the fact that I just had to be a kind ear, and they could just go on for the entire session, and I would just give them a little bit of validation, and it was sincere and genuine, of course. And they would say, "You've helped me so much. I feel so much better. Here's, your money, whatever." And it was something that I really didn't do that much, except for, doing what you're doing right now, just listening, just genuinely listening.
Yeah.
And I think that's how women process things for the most part. Where if I did that with a guy, it would not work at all. And I knew, so early on in my training, I was taught that you have to do the exact same thing with men and women, that there was really no difference. And somewhere, even though there wasn't any research out about it, it just did not feel right to me. And so when a guy came to me, I automatically kind of went into, okay, him and I are a partnership, and we're going to figure out what the hell's going on, and we're going to work through it. And a lot of times, guys love that. And it's something that if you give a guy a plan or an objective, then he's going to follow through with that.
Yeah.
Every time I gave someone an assignment, they would get it completed.
Wow.
Women, not so much.
Yeah, I can see that. I can totally see that. And, for the mix of other content creators that are out there, in the Manosphere especially, like I feel like all of those guys give solutions, right? They kind of categorize things, and then this is what you should do if you're in category A or category B.
Yes.
It's very logical and clear cut. So it makes sense why a man likes to kind of consume that information and that they find that really beneficial.
Exactly.
Why is there this difference between men and women, where women just want to be able to vent and men just want to get to the solution? Is it like literally their brains are different?
Yeah, it's literally their brains are different as far as how they process pain and information.
Yeah.
And so essentially what happens is that with men, they have an input, they process it, and they say, okay, I need to take action on that. Where women, they'll have the same input, but what they will do, and you can speak to this, I'm sure, is they will, it's kind of your maybe category when it comes to the dating part, is they will think about a lot of different ways to kind of approach that, and then get to the point of saying, okay, then maybe I'll take some action. Where for man, a guy, it's just like A to B, versus a woman's A to B to C to D to, E then.
Absolutely. I see that completely, especially with dating, because men will say either it's a yes or no when they meet a woman, and women will have a yes, no, maybe box. And that maybe box is where she's going back and forth and thinking about the pros and cons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's something that men need to recognize, that that's how women are. So it's not necessarily a negative thing if you're in that maybe category. It's just how your brain's processing things. And, it tends to be kind of more emotionally driven rather than, kind of logically driven. And so if you think about a typical guy who goes into a therapeutic setting, and the model that he's being, the model that the therapist is working from is giving him that validation, so to speak, but no solutions. And that's something that, again, with my training, it was something where the patient had to come up with a solution, and you just had to guide them there.
Yeah, I was going to say, because like, is that kind of a touchy area, because like if you give advice, are some therapists hesitant to do that because they're worried about that advice maybe not going well?
Yes. Well, I mean, that's always been the concern is
Right.
You don't give advice, direct advice. This is what I've taught and trained, which I don't necessarily agree with, is that there's two reasons why you don't give advice. One is it will work, and the other is it won't work. And the reason they say it's negative if it works is because of the fact that then the person may get dependent upon you for working through problems. And if it doesn't work, they can come back to you and say, I did this and it didn't work.
Right.
And then
you didn't know what you were talking about.
You didn't know what you're
dude.
talking about. Exactly. And there ends up being a break in the therapeutic alliance. But here's the thing, though. If you come from a position of, we are partners working on this, and I'm not going to give you a specific solution, but I'm going to give you options. And so, for example, if you're saying I'm struggling in the dating market, let's diagnose why that is, for one. Maybe it's just because of the current meta, or maybe it's because of something the guy is failing to do. Then it's breaking that down and saying, okay, how can we work on this? And there are, a lot of specific cases, and this really doesn't have to do with dating as much, but there was a guy, for example, that had extreme amount of anxiety, and he was completely not interested in going the medication route at all as far as managing symptoms. And so with him, for example, I had somebody that I had worked with kind of concurrently, and because he was this is a guy who did not want to drive, could not take an elevator.
Oh, wow. Pretty severe anxiety.
Exactly. And so the only way to get this guy better was to desensitize himself to that. But in order to do that, he had to take action. He had to at least get in an elevator to start with, for example, then get out. And then, he would take one floor and that type of thing. And he would have somebody that I worked with, like as a paraprofessional, with him during that time to talk to him, to kind of take his mind off of it. But that was very action-oriented. And I remember with this guy, like, he made a lot of strides. But if he wouldn't have got that help, he just would have been stuck at home, unemployed.
Yeah, versus another therapeutic approach would be maybe just him thinking through the process and getting the courage, but like really that's not any kind of actionable steps.
Exactly.
Is that really going to make him kind of cross that line at any point?
Yes. I don't think it's going to. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Is that if he came in and just, consistently spoke about the fact that everything was overwhelming for him and he was completely stuck and anxious all the time, but there was no path forward as far as solutions, then how is this guy going to move forward? By me saying, I hear what you're saying, that's got to be really difficult.
He wouldn't. He could even get worse, wouldn't you say?
Potentially, yes.
If you get in that cycle.
Because men, we've been socialized, and I think this has to do with our brain chemistry as well, that we don't want to feel like we're a burden to anybody. We don't want to feel, because it's something that we've been socialized to believe that if we do that, we're worthless and weak. And so if just coming and talking about things, but then there being no progress made or no actions taken, that can feel worse rather than, going in and saying, okay, let's game plan this.
Yeah.
Let's figure this out, or let's, and the thing too, with back to the advice whole piece, if you come at it from the approach of, we're going to be working on this together, and you know what? Some of this might work, some of this might not, but we have to give it a shot.
I mean, by making it that team effort too, you're empowering him to some degree just to make that decision.
Yes.
So even that seems to be like a baby step forward into taking action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where, the whole kind of, I think female therapists, generally speaking, will do better with female clients because their brain thinks the same way. And but with, and again, the field is very heavily populated with females. So if a guy goes in, and it's just embarrassing to talk to a female about a lot of these issues, where if it's a guy and he's, I'm pretty down-to-earth person, it's one of those things where pretty quickly they realize, like, this guy's safe. He's okay. It's okay to talk about anything with him. He's not going to judge me.
Yeah. I'm imagining also like a young guy having difficulty in the dating world, which is many young men right now, going in and seeing a female therapist. And
who has no clue.
Who has no clue, right? So even like her ability to validate those things is already going to be challenging. But even if she's like really excellent and experienced in her job and does know to do that, even the advice piece, like, I feel like that would be also very challenging for her because, I feel like a lot of the general advice that women will give is really designed for other women, right? It's, well, it'll happen someday. Love will come along when you least expect it.
Yeah, the blue pill.
Yeah,
right?
It would be a lot of that messaging, which is like zero action.
Yes.
And that is the opposite of what men need.
Exactly. And that's why the red pill movement has taken on so much, because it does give guys, I think sometimes it's false hope. That's one of the reasons where I wouldn't consider myself red pilled. So, for example, having, a lot of money and status or game or whatever, I think that can only go so far. Where I think with the red pill guys, they kind of see that as being the end all be all. And the red pill's a huge, there's everywhere from pickup artists to, people that are pretty much almost black pilled. So it's this huge area, but generally speaking, it's very actionable. But I think it's kind of, they have the answer. They try to have the answers.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of it's not a one size fits all type deal. It's not go to the gym,
Right.
Get money, get a nice car, and you're going to get a woman, for example. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Because what happens to the man that does all those things and then is not successful?
Exactly.
I mean, I would think that would be the opposite of empowerment, right? That could even lead to a certain level of depression.
Yes, absolutely.
Because where do you go from there?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why, so one of the things, and I think we spoke about this on this podcast before, I don't know if we actually edited it out or not, but was that, looking back on my experiences before kind of jumping into the Manosphere, it's something that I really feel bad, because when I did work with partnership with a lot of these guys, because of the fact that I listened to my training kind of more than my gut, I didn't offer, for example, like looks maxing advice, which I think if a guy's obviously, because there was a lot of guys who would come in who just, you could tell, didn't pay attention to their appearance at all.
Yeah, they just didn't take care of themselves.
They didn't even shower half the time.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean? And so like that behavior I would call out, because that affected me personally as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, how are you ever going to get a woman if you're not even clean?
Yeah.
But it's at this point, it'd be something where if a guy came in and I knew that there's things that he could change, I would say, before you put yourself in the dating market, like, make sure that you are as presentable as possible, and your living space is presentable, and your car is presentable. Stuff like that a lot of people don't like to talk about. But I think two guys, if they have that trust and that connection, can talk about that. But think about that, hearing that coming from a woman. So let's say you were my therapist, and I kind of, everything about me was slovenly, and you ask some questions about, kind of how do you keep your car, how do you keep your house or apartment or whatever. And, I just said, I don't really pay attention to it that much. But every time I go out on a first date, or, I see somebody, like, it doesn't lead anywhere. Like, from hearing, like, and let's say your response was, well, maybe you should think about, like, if your car should be like pristine inside, because that shows a lot to a woman about how you manage your life.
Yeah.
A lot of times, but hearing from that from a woman, a lot of times a guy might think, oh, that's just what a woman feels. But hearing that from another guy, that's validating because it's coming from another man, and it's something where it's an actionable behavior.
Yeah. So I can see that. I think even for a woman to kind of give that advice might be difficult. I think that she might go a worse route, and she might question him as to why he doesn't keep his car clean.
Oh yeah,
right.
well,
She wants to talk about it and dissect it.
Yes,
which may not be the best thing for that guy, right? Like he might do better with just that actionable. You need to do this.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's important to explore a little bit. But the reality is, an answer is most likely the fact that the guy's not really thinking about it much.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not like there's some deep-seated, my mom wasn't there for me, and so far I'm not going to clean my apartment. It's, it's not that. It's more, I think, recognizing what women will find appealing and what's a step that a guy can do that's going to make him more attractive to the opposite sex.
Right. And especially with the shower thing, like if he's sitting right there in front of her and she's like, look, like you need to shower, that I feel like could be taken a very different way compared to a male saying that to him.
Yeah.
Because it can feel like maybe more insulting.
Yeah.
And like a put down.
Well, and I think for sure the guy would be more self-conscious then.
Yes.
Versus just being around another guy.
Yes.
And the other guy too, again, what I really try to do with all my patients, but specifically with the guys, is try to bond with them and create a relationship where it was safe. And so I could say, dude, did you shower? Because, I'm picking up some stench here. And they'd be like, yeah, man, sorry. I had a long shift and, I wasn't able to get in here in time or I forgot that today was therapy day or whatever it is. And so, but he wouldn't get offended.
Right. Or defensive.
He would
just state the facts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also I would put it in a way that I wasn't coming off as judgmental or critical. It was just kind of, two guys talking about saying, hey, maybe if you did this, this might help. And, maybe by the time I see you next time, I want you to talk to 3 cashiers at Wegmans.
Yeah.
And just start up a conversation while you're in line. And I want you to take notes on that. And I want you to come back and tell me, what did you say? What did they say? How that and how that impact you? How did that make you feel?
And they would complete that homework.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Because they had something actionable to do. And so, again, I don't want to paint this with a whole broad stroke saying that women who are therapists don't do this. I just think that between kind of how a woman's brain works, how she's socialized, and how she's trained, it's just not something that's natural. And honestly, for me, I kind of went against the grain of doing that because I've done it for so many years. And for the first, probably 5 to 10 years, it was something that I realized that I'm not making a lot of progress with these guys like I want. So I need to kind of change things up. And that's how I even changed. So for example, in my office, I have where I sit, and then I have a couch, and then I have a chair to the side on both sides. And most of the time, what I would do is I'd have the guy sit on to the chair to the left or right of me. So it wasn't direct eye contact like you and I are having right now, because guys typically are uncomfortable with that. And so, and also, the first thing I would say to the guy the first time he walked in for a session is, hey, you can sit wherever you want except for that chair. And I make a joke or whatever. That was mine. And inevitably, they would always choose the chair to the side instead of sitting on the couch.
Interesting. Whereas I'm sure women would be the opposite.
Yeah, women were always like on the couch looking straight at me. And so...
that makes sense. I think that even plays into the importance of men having other male friends.
Yes.
Right? Because I've seen it time and time again where there's like a man that has, maybe he just kind of relies on his relationship with a female and she's kind of his best friend.
Yes.
And that's his world. And he doesn't really spend much time with anyone else other than her. I could see that being detrimental. I could see even like a man just having a lot of female friends and not really any male friends being detrimental, because then he's never really getting that aspect of, having somebody there side by side.
I don't think it's about, I don't think guys don't have the ability to do this. I mean, that's one of the reasons where I think the Manosphere has been so positive as a whole, is that it's given men a voice to talk about what's going on and to provide some solutions, where before you would have to look at a textbook or actually participate in a therapeutic process, where now a lot of guys can go on YouTube and get, some solid advice. I think that there's definitely creators that are better than others. So for example, I think to me, the best creator on YouTube is for relationships for men is probably Alexander Grace. Mm-hmm. He knows how to talk to guys, and he's extremely intelligent, and he's been doing this for years. I think Chris Williamson is also amazing. But these guys are people who are really actionable as far as, first of all, they bring up important topics, and then, they talk about solutions.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that from Alexander Grace. Like towards the end of his videos, it's what can you do about it? So I can totally see that.
Exactly. And I think most guys who maybe aren't familiar with him, if they checked out his channel, I think it would resonate with them a lot more. He's kind of more for the older crowd, but for the younger guys, I think they could, if they had an open mind, I think they get a lot out of it.
It's almost like having a mentor. I think that can be so important for men too.
Yes.
In both roles, right? Whether it's having a mentor or being a mentor.
Yes.
Because if you're the one with the mentor, like that's the person you're looking up to, it kind of gives you that kind of goal-driven status. And if you're the mentor, it's got to give you purpose, right? To kind of help somebody along.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that if guys aren't in a position where they don't have their own children yet, then, because when they do, it's something that really changes them. And it can really help give them a purpose. And so I think in lieu of that, I think there's so many kids out there that don't have stable men in their lives.
Yeah.
I would really advocate for, if you're a guy watching this, to be a big brother to a young kid or, a teenager, that you can teach them basic life skills and how to have a conversation and how to navigate the world, because they're not going to get the same impression from their mom than they would their dad. And if their dad's not around, they need some kind of male role modeling. The other thing is that there's very few teachers that are men. So right now in the U.S., it's only 24% of teachers are male, between all the way from kindergarten to 12th grade.
Yeah.
So there's a big group of boys right now that are just not getting that mentoring. And so if you're a guy out there, and let's say you're struggling with dating or you're just struggling with depression, I really believe that being a mentor, you will get just as much out of it as you would be the young guy that's getting the mentoring from you, because it gives you that sense of purpose, that drive, and you start to see this person, get to the point where they start growing and evolving, and that feels really good.
Yeah, I really could see that being the substitution, really, for a lot of men right now that are single and lonely and are even in their 20s, because it's amazing how many men in their 20s are single, that even if they want a relationship, they just haven't been successful in obtaining one. So, I mean, a lot of these guys are obviously focused on achieving that, right? And we're talking about them turning to the Manosphere and turning on YouTube and finding out what they can do in order to be successful in finding a relationship. But I think that's a great side note is, you get involved and be a mentor to another young man, and that'll give you purpose.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that you don't need to do the other things.
Of course not.
And you can still focus on getting a relationship, which you're more likely to when you're older anyways as a man.
Yes, exactly. Well, we just read another interesting stat that right now, the Pew Research study came out with a self-reported study stating that between the ages of 18 and 29, only 30% of guys are in relationships.
That's so low.
Where in that same age demographic, it's 63% of women. And so what that says is that women are dating older guys. So the good thing about that is that there's hope for guys who are in our audience right now watching that are in their 20s, that if they continue to self-develop and, honestly do some of the red pill stuff as far as get your money right, get your career on track, make sure your car's clean, all that other stuff, then you're gonna be able to then go into that dating market and go in, and men are mostly attracted to younger women anyways, so they're able to go into that, mid low 20s, even in their 30s, and be able to get a relationship.
Yeah.
Because women are looking for men, and you can speak to this more than I can, but I know this to be true, that are going to be stable and are emotionally, financially, all those different
Absolutely.
things.
Emotionally.
Mature. And the other thing that I found really interesting is that, so one of the calls to action, so women are completely out competing men right now in school. One of the solutions they're looking at, which I think would be interesting if they tried to implement that, would be men starting school later than women. So they're on a more equal track. So being a year or two, because women are so much more evolved in their brains,
right,
compared to men.
They develop that much faster.
Yes. And so that's why if you talk to any woman who's in their early 20s, a lot of times she is really not going to want a guy who's the same age as her, because he's going to be really immature compared to her.
Right.
So there's hope for guys in that point. But here's my bigger point, and this is the thing with the mentoring, is think about if you're going on a first date with a woman and you say, I'm a mentor to a couple of boys or whatever. Think about how many points that's going to score.
That's huge points.
Right? Because it shows that you're nurturing, you're caring, and you're a guy out there who tries to make the world better.
Right.
And you're great father material.
Right, because you have to be that much more mature and emotionally stable in order to even do that.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can't take your kids out drinking or to the strip club. You have to, the thing with mentoring, and this is when I was a mentor when I was younger, and so this was something that I kind of fell off because of all my other obligations, but I did it for 5 years, and it was something that the way I approached it was I worked with boys a lot of times that didn't have fathers in the home. So the most basic things like learning how to shave, learning how to change a tire, learning how to change the oil, learning how to do basic cleaning. They were just not educated on it all. And so I would spend my time with them saying, okay, today we're going to learn to change the oil in the car.
Yeah. And
they would feel empowered after that day's session. And I would feel good because I taught someone a valuable skill to have. Now, not as much with changing the oil, for example, but, that was just something.
Now, compare that to a boy that doesn't have that mentor, and what's the likelihood of him just being kind of self-motivated to kind of give himself things to learn, right? And to maybe turn to YouTube and learn those things.
Sure.
And do things one at a time. Like maybe, but I don't think it's going to be as empowering.
Yeah. Well, I think none of these skills are taught in school.
Right.
And typically where people learn from this is their dads. And so their dad's not around. They won't even know where to start. You can go on YouTube and you can find anything.
Yeah.
If you wanted to. But if you don't know where to start or what's important, how do you even go search that?
Yeah, because how do you even know what is important to search? What do you put in the search bar?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's why having an older guy who's been around the block a few times, even if they're in their 20s, saying, okay, like there's certain life skills that I have, then I'm going to employ those.
Right.
And I'm going to help the next generation of men learn those things. That's empowering for both parties.
Right. And I think there's also a level of them maybe looking at your life and looking at who you are. And if they look up to that, then that is motivation to kind of do those things that you're telling them to do because they want to be in the same spot that you're in someday.
Yes.
And I think the same goes for, guys that are in relationships potentially that are good at a young age. Like I think that those guys end up being like really motivated through school and to kind of get there quickly in life because they have that set goal. You know, if this is like so serious that he wants to marry the girl, I think he's more likely to make like all the right choices and to make different choices that are more so, you know, for the potential relationship and for the potential family and building around that. So I could see that guys that don't have that, they may struggle a bit more because if they don't feel like they have that purpose,
Yes.
it's really hard for them to work on something that is just a potential. Whereas I think women are very different. Like I think that I do totally fine like working for a while just on the potential for something. And I don't need something like right in front of me motivating me to give me purpose.
Well, think about video games, for example. Like I'm not a gamer, and I never really have been. I played Madden when I was a little younger, that type of thing. But as far as, you know, some of these intricate games, like Destiny would do, for example, while he's on a stream, more men do that than women. But why is that? And I think the reason is, especially with a lot of these games, is the fact that you're building something. It's actionable. And you're competing against other men, like Call of Duty or something like that, or you have a teamwork. And so what I think these games do is they're a replacement for things that guys ideally should be doing in their real lives. And I'm not trying to downplay video games. I think they have their place. I think guys, you know, can use them as an outlet for sure. But at the same time, I think there's a big difference between playing video games 4 hours a day versus learning life skills and, you know, putting yourself out there and trying to, you know, for example, help a younger kid out. But so I think the message I'm trying to send, like with video games, is that I get why guys do it. It makes sense to me. But I think immersing yourself in that world, unless you're going to make a living out of it, like being a streamer or a competitive gamer.
Right, because that's different. If you have income coming in from something like that, like that's automatic purpose. But
that's small percentage
very
of guys.
Small percentage.
Exactly. And so I think that that's important as far as, you know, to have that understanding of, you know, okay, this is how my brain works. I'm, you know, as a guy, I'm going to feel better when I work through something. And how I work through something is I take action. And I get to a better place by not ignoring my feelings and pretending they're not there, recognizing that they're there, but then saying, okay, let's put an actionable plan in place so that I can start to feel better. And so one of the things that I recommend to every guy, and honestly every human, is you have to move. You have to exercise. And that is going to make you feel better just by doing that. And I think a lot of guys have gotten to the point where they feel like, you know, I really don't want to do that. I really believe that the gym is underrated because it's not just about looks maxing. It's about achieving goals. Like when you get to the point where, you know, if you're a guy, like you can bench press 225, like it's kind of a big landmark. If you can get to that point, that, or at least your body weight to start, there's an incredible amount of pride that comes along with it because it takes a lot of hard work to get there. And so, yeah, some guys are naturally strong and they can just do it. But the majority of us, like, we really have to work hard to get to that point. So you're getting that reward as far as seeing those weights go up and seeing your muscles grow and getting stronger. And that with that comes more confidence.
Right. And especially for guys that are depressed, like it is very difficult to do anything, any kind of action. So just making to that point of getting to the gym, like, and doing something it's going to feel like a huge amount of progress. It's going to feel really good because you've done something that felt really hard to do. And I would think that barrier becomes less and less and less as you do it. And then you get all of the natural endorphins too, of course, from the exercise.
Yeah, nobody ever feels worse walking out of the gym than they did prior to walking in. And so you're always, that's what guys have to tell themselves if they're just starting out, is that when I leave, I'm going to feel better. That's unless you injure yourself, that's a guarantee. And so that's something that I really believe in the manosphere. It really has more to do with, kind of attracting women. But I think that the real strength in it is getting to the point where you're involving yourself in self-improvement, and you're seeing your fitness get better, you're seeing your strength get better, you're feeling your clothes fit differently, and and you're taking action to do something about your life.
What do you think is holding a lot of guys back in doing that? Because I feel like the information is out there, right? Like we all know that exercise is important. So what is it, do you think, that guys that are, specifically guys that are depressed, why do you think they just can't bring themselves?
Well, I think it's. Remember when we had Destiny on the show and he talked about friction? And what he spoke about was the fact that we live in such a frictionless society right now. And so going to the gym takes effort. You're going to sweat. You're going to toil. There's going to be struggle with it. Yeah. Where if you're just playing a video game, not so much, which is ironic coming from Destiny. Because you can tell he doesn't go to the gym and all he does is play video games. But he's smart.
He's aware.
He's smart.
He's still aware.
He's super smart. Yes, yeah. He's aware. But I think that's the big first barrier. And then the second one, I think, is just kind of getting started and getting uncomfortable. Because when you start your fitness journey, and I know you're into fitness as well, it sucks at first. It's hard.
It hurts.
Sore.
You're really sore.
A lot of times, especially if you overdo it.
Yeah.
Which I definitely don't recommend.
I know.
The next day you have a hard time even getting out of bed.
Yeah.
But if you do it in a manner which is consistent, but it's built over time, and it becomes a part of your lifestyle, then, and especially I recommend listening to a good podcast or having a really good playlist of, say, like metal, it's nothing better than lifting weights and listening to, Metallica or something. Yeah. And if you're able to do that consistently, you're able to then see the results. And especially if the place like where I go has a sauna, you're able to build friendships out of that. And so, because I've been going to the same place for like 5 years now, and over that time, I see the same guys over and over again. And, I call them gym friends. So we don't really see each other outside of the gym, but it's okay. Because I have my friends outside of the gym that I talk to. But I like going to the gym and saying, hey, there's Dave. I want to talk to him about evolutionary psychology. And we'll have a 20-minute conversation, which makes the sauna go by really quickly when you're engaged in conversation. Because you're in that kind of flow state. And, the lights are dim and you're side by side, all that good stuff. And so you start to then cultivate relationships and friendships. And you just feel like you're part of a community as well.
Yeah, it's almost like having another hobby, right? Like just going to the gym turns into a hobby in which you're building relationships.
Exactly. I don't think there's any really net negatives to being a consistent gym goer. I think if anything, and and I would consider myself kind of on the black pill range of things. And a lot of times, they'll say, don't go to the gym, like if you're short, for example, because you'll get, if you get too buff, that's going to work against you. And I hear what they're saying, and I think that there is some truth to that. But I think what happens is that if you are able to get stronger and develop, these kind of friendships and get more confidence from that, like, who cares what a woman thinks?
Yeah, you don't want to do everything in your life just in order to maximize the chance of getting a girl.
Exactly.
Especially something like going to the gym, which is clearly so healthy and everybody needs to do.
Yes, exactly. Well, and I think the reason that everybody needs to do it is the fact that most of our culture and our society is people who have jobs that aren't working with their bodies. And so, but our bodies have evolved to move. And the reason that we get those endorphins is because that's a feedback mechanism of saying, okay, that was a good thing that kept you alive. And so it's one thing if you're a guy and you work construction, for example, and you're a laborer, maybe you don't need to go to the gym that much, because by the time you're done, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
If you do have, even just to go for a walk on the treadmill or something like that, that would even be great. But the reality is that I would say, I don't want to throw a percentage on it, but I would say it's a high percentage of men and women nowadays that don't have jobs that require them to put a lot of stress on their body. So I think that, if you look at throughout history, most of the jobs that people had, they were either in farms or factories. And before that, it was hunting, gathering. And so you had to use your body. And so you would get that positive feedback loop as far as putting effort and energy into things, where nowadays you're not getting that. Especially if, let's say, because think about it, a lot of times people who do this, if they have a job that's outside their house, they get up, they get in their car, they drive their office, they sit in their cubicle, they drive back, and then they play video games, they go to sleep, they do rinse and repeat, right? Like how can that not be depressing, living a life like that?
Yeah, because especially with that lack of socialization, you think about the guys like what you were just talking about that work maybe construction. Well, it's not just one guy working on his own on one little part of the project. Like usually there's a team of guys that typically work together. And so for those guys to be always seeing each other, working on something, they're going to be friends. And they're going to have that social impact compared to men that might work in different fields with, let's say, many women. Maybe there's not many guys. So it would be like therapists, right?
Yeah.
That have maybe one other male coworker in a big setting.
Yes.
If that. Did you ever have that, by the way? Like when you worked in a big setting, was there ever another male therapist? Never.
No. And I saw like the toxicity in some of the women that were other therapists.
I always hear that if there's a workplace with a lot of women, there's a lot of toxicity that men will see.
Well, this has changed, but I remember earlier in my career, like with a specific diagnosis, which was BPD, borderline personality disorder, like the women therapists would be like, "Oh my God, I got another borderline." They would, like in our staff meetings, they would say that. And I was thinking to myself, wow, these are supposed to be empathetic people. And it's something that I just felt like there was so much drama and
you couldn't connect to that.
I couldn't connect to that. And especially when they had the birthday parties, that's when I wanted to like go out to lunch. So
for other guys that work in that type of field, where there's it's overwhelmingly women compared to men, I could see how it draws an even greater need for them to have some sort of outside hobby, something in which there's more guys around them and they're doing something.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that's the positive aspect of trying to be kind of in a male-dominated field. Unfortunately, it's terrible for connecting with women. But I think as far as, like you talked about at the construction site, like the one thing I know, and I would say probably the most fun job I had as far as prior to being in private practice was actually working at the jail. And the reason is because of the fact that I was bonding with both the inmates and the sheriff's deputies who work there. And so it was something where, and the reality was there wasn't much difference about them. They all had similar issues. They were just kind of on opposite sides of the bars. But the thing that I really liked about it was the fact that everybody was busting each other's balls all the time. And that was really a fun environment to work in, even though it was a really stressful one, for obvious reasons. But at the same time, some of these inmates, their personalities were hilarious. When they would tell me how they got locked up, it would be that session would be just them kind of telling the story, and we both laugh, and it'd be therapeutic for them. But it was fun for me versus being ultra serious all the time about everything. And so I think it's important to try to kind of foster those friendships. And unfortunately, though, I think a lot of times guys, even if they are in male-dominated fields, they still don't have that ability to do that because they're in a cubicle somewhere Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're not really interacting or working side by side. Somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that's where one of the big positives about video games come in, going back to that, is that a lot of times that's when guys who are younger are having friends. It's through the headset. And that's why I would never like advocate taking that away from anybody.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a terrible substitution for sitting face to face like we are, or side by side, and actually having a conversation, even if it's going out for a beer,
right,
or whatever it is, or getting together to watch a game. Or, some guys who are into like RPGs, like the role-playing games, like, Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. Like, I think I've always thought it was funny that there was always different camps when you were younger. Like, guys who were into sports would like make fun of guys who were kind of nerdy, and the guys who are nerdy would kind of look at the jocks as kind of idiots.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it's the same thing. It's just a different outlet but it's bonding.
Right. They're still getting the same thing out of it.
If you're wearing a jersey to a football game,
yeah,
that's the same as cosplay.
Oh no.
It really
You've
is.
just ruined it for so many guys. No.
Well, you think about
That's
it. What's
true.
the difference? If you're with your buddies and you guys are all, wearing your team's jerseys, merchandise, whatever, and you're cheering for the same team, what's the difference between your love for Star Wars and dressing up like Han Solo or whatever?
That's true.
So
that's true.
Exactly.
There's not really any. You're doing it for the same reason.
Yeah, and that's why nobody should judge each other for their preferences when it comes to how they socialize or what they're into, because it's all arbitrary. And so I think but finding something, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Like I used to work with this client who, again, really nerdy stuff, but he would like paint little models. And then he would have these role-playing games where there'd be armies fighting other armies. I don't even know what it was called. This shows how great, and he told me this many times. So he would use this huge magnifying glass, but he would have these models that were probably an inch tall and have extreme details on all of them.
Wow.
And then him and his friends would get together and they would, roll the dice and play these games. But he would feel really proud of the fact that he painted all like 100 soldiers.
Right.
And they had different ranks and all this other stuff and different time periods in history. And
he wouldn't have done that just by himself. The whole thing is that he has other guys that also enjoy that.
Exactly. And so he would go to, in the city we live, there's like 3 or 4 like different gaming stores where people can actually go. And it's mostly guys. So you're not going to be able to run day game there. But if you're into that at all, if you're into any of these role-playing games, there is outlets that you can just go there and hang out for 3 or 4 hours and make friends.
I'm curious, what do you think somebody in the red pill community would tell a guy like that?
He'd probably tell him like, man up, and that's
give it up.
Yeah,
don't do that.
I would think a lot of times that might be the message. And because, maybe women might think it's nerdy or something. Yeah. But like I said earlier, who cares what women think when it comes to that? That's your thing.
It is. And the truth is that if she likes you,
she doesn't care.
She doesn't care.
Exactly.
Yeah. She'll actually, like if you get into a relationship with her, she'll probably totally support that. And she'll like that kind of nerdy side of you.
Yeah. And there are women out there that are nerdy themselves.
Absolutely.
And so, for example, if you went to Comic-Con or you went to some of these other video cons or whatever, that, there's that's not the best place to pick up women. But at the same time, it's something where there are going to be women there.
Yeah.
And, that's why when it comes to like OnlyFans, for example, there are women who just, this is not their real selves, but they go on there and they do cosplay and things like that.
Yeah, so they're targeting that audience.
They're targeting that audience.
It.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's where I would say guys like stay away from that because it's not real.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is that it's finding your niche. What are you into? And then leaning into that hard. But I think there has to be some kind of physicality at some point as well. So
of actually doing something.
And I think it's also getting the hell out of the house.
Yeah.
It really is. And it's something that we, for the last, almost 3 years now, people haven't been able to do that as much. But as things have opened up now, again, I think that this is where that friction part comes in. Even if it's uncomfortable, you have to do it. Like, for example, like when I come here, this is really uncomfortable for me a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so
Well, the camera's on,
and
the lights are
everybody's
shining.
watching and listening. And, but it's something that I grow from this experience. And every time I leave here, I'm glad I did it. And I also, it's a challenge for me because it's not something that I'm comfortable with or used to, but because of the fact that I'm leaning into it and I'm trying to improve, so I'm trying to cut down on my no's and ums and things like that, the more that the better that I get at that, the better that I feel like I'm growing as a guy.
Yeah.
And as a person.
Yeah, you're seeing that success.
Exactly. But it's the reason is because I keep coming back.
Yeah.
So do you. You're more of a natural at it than I am. But it's something that I'm sure you get the same benefit rather than just sliding in front of your mirror.
Absolutely. It's very different, right? Being in my own room versus a studio with a bunch of cameras and a bunch of lights.
Yes.
It is. There's definitely a level of friction. And it definitely feels rewarding afterwards when you do anything that has that friction. It's difficult. I think that what's really hard for young guys in this day and age is that there's so much friction that has built up. And where do they start?
Yeah.
If they're having a really difficult time, do they start with trying to find a mentor? Do they start with therapy? Do they start with just going to the gym? Do they start with just getting some kind of hobby and trying to get more male friends? Because there's a lot of guys out there that would probably say that they don't have any male friends.
Yeah.
Which is scary.
And the stats bear that out as far as, I think it's 1 out of every 3 guys reports, in his 20s, reports not having any close friends.
Yeah, and it's really hard once you get to a certain age, like even mid-20s, late 20s. If you're out of school at that point, I think it's really difficult to build friendships.
Yes, it is. But you have to be creative. And it's something that you have to kind of find shared values with. The only way you're going to do that is you got to go out of your comfort zone. And so it's something that, one of the most rewarding aspects of this podcast for me has been my friendship with Wheat Waffles. We are really good friends right now. We travel together, we hang out. I know his girlfriend really well. He's been here a few times. I'm going there pretty soon, and it's all because of YouTube. And even though he could be my son, he's been a mentor to me as far as helping to get off this channel off the ground. And every time we have an issue, he's a go-to as far as correcting that issue. But that was something, for example, that was not planned, but came about organically because of the fact that I said, I have some time. I want to do this. And I feel like I have something to give back to men. And it gives me purpose. And he feels the same way. And so we're able to bond on that.
Yeah, it's more about that shared interest that kind of sparked that friendship.
Yes.
Which I think is how that happens for men. Whereas women, it can just be more commonalities, or it can be, emotionally talking to each other and bonding from that.
Yes.
Even if they could have very different interests, I think 2 women can be good friends.
Sure.
But I do think there needs to be that kind of spark of you're talking about stuff, right? You're not just talking about yourselves and catching up. Yeah, talking about your feelings.
Man, I had a really bad day today. You
don't talk like that, do you? It's
no,
like,
don't talk
hey,
like
we
that.
got an issue on our channel, something happened.
Or it's mostly hey, I saw a really interesting video or TikTok, and I want your take on it. Or he'll do the same thing back to me. It's gotten to the point where he even will send me different thumbnails to say which one's better. Do you think? Yeah. And because he trusts me, and it's something that that trust is mutual. But it was something that happened overnight. It took time, but it's something that I guess my point is that when it comes to male friendships, if you have a common interest and you lean into that, then I think that if you are open to connecting with people, there's other guys that will want to connect as well.
Yeah. And it sounds like guys, they kind of need to seek that purpose, right? Like being active and doing that thing. Like for you with this, starting the podcast, being that thing, like you wouldn't have ever become friends with him, if you hadn't even initiated starting this.
Exactly.
In which, you're passionate about.
Yes. But this also took a lot of friction.
Yeah.
Because think about it, I had to put together, which I did, a great team of people. Emily, people may not know, but we have a great editor and videographer. We have great producers. We have a guy who does awesome thumbnails for us. We have a whole team of people that you and I put together. And it's something that's a shared interest that we all have. And we've been able to meet other people and each other through this. So and I'm not saying everybody should go start a podcast because it's really expensive. But at the same time, find something that isn't.
Right.
Maybe if you get to my age and you have a little bit of dough, you can do it.
Then you can, yeah.
But if you're in your 20s, again, maybe go to a Bills game and maybe go with your brother or something, and go join a tailgate. Like they will be welcoming.
Yes, absolutely.
And maybe the next time you go to a game, you'll see them, and you'll be able to be a part of that group then. But you got, again, I think guys got to get out of the house.
Yeah.
And if they can do that, then that's the step number one. And I think if you are depressed and if you are struggling with mental health issues, I think trying to find a good therapist, but also walking into it, and whether that's a male or female, and obviously for guys, I would recommend if they can find a male therapist, which is tricky nowadays, do that first. But if they can't, if they're with a woman, tell them what they need.
That's good advice.
Exactly. Say, I'm struggling with this issue. I need some feedback from you. And if they say, sorry, that's not how this process works, I'll help you discover that on your own or something, because that's kind of the typical line, then find someone else.
Yeah.
But I think somebody, especially in 2023, if you go in there and you say, listen, I'm really lost right now with a lot of different things, and I really need some good feedback and some tasks to do, is that something you can help me with? Interview them just as much as they're interviewing you and see if it's a good fit.
Do you think that's why there's such an explosion of coaches out there?
I think so.
I mean, I don't think there needs to be any formal training for any type of coach.
Yes.
But coaches give actionable stuff to work on.
Exactly. Yes. But I think the only thing with coaches is that I think sometimes you have to worry about credentials a little bit.
I know.
Because it's something where, a lot of people, and this is one of my gripes with the Manosphere, is so many people have programs.
Courses.
And courses and things like that. And I'm not saying that it's all garbage.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just say be wary. Because the one thing that our podcast is doing is we're not selling anything, and we're never going to sell anything. And so we're just trying to give information that's going to help guys. I'm not looking for new patients. You've got plenty of followers on TikTok, and so if we're not doing this for money or for clout. We're doing this. I can say for myself, I'm doing this because this gives me purpose. And I like collaborating with a colleague that is intelligent, that you and I can brainstorm about ideas and talk about things. And that's been very helpful in my own life. And I want to thank you about joining me on here, because that is something that's been life-changing for me.
I really appreciate that. Hearing that. That's awesome feedback.
Yeah.
That is like the biggest difference that I see between doing this podcast and doing my TikTok channel, is that here it's more solution-based. Like we really do at every episode try towards the end to come up with real solutions. And I know that, like, even though I feel like I'm pretty in touch with what's going on with men, I know that I wouldn't be able to come up with these solutions that we've come up with together. I think, having your perspective, especially as a therapist and as a man, that plays a huge role in really coming up with the things that can be actionable, that will be impactful and have an effect on guys' lives, which is so important. I think that, my channel, I mostly focus on validation, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think TikTok is kind of more designed for that.
Yeah.
Right? It is more of like short little clips, and it tends to be more stuff that's relatable,
Yes.
that goes viral, depending on the size of the group in which they find it to be relatable. Whereas like YouTube does tend to be more of a step 1, step 2, step 3, do these things
Yes.
for this outcome
Exactly.
type setup.
Yeah. And
So
that's where I'd ask our audience too, as far as what are some things that you want us to research so that we can give you some solutions to. So what are some topics that are interesting to you? Emily and we can come up with topics all day long, but it's something that I'd really like to hear from the audience members in the comments section about what do they want to hear about and what do they want solutions to. And as a team, you and I will try to figure that out so we can put that information out there.
yes.
And I know this is very complicated, layered things that we're talking about. This is not easy. There's no easy solutions. But I think there are some things that are better than others. And so, for example, like when we talked about going to the gym, like I think that's a really solid solution to feeling better about oneself and actionable mental health, fighting mental health issues and depression and anxiety. And so that's something that I'd really like to hear from our audience as far as what do they want to hear?
Yeah.
What topics do they want us to talk about?
Absolutely.
Because it's interesting because our videos are kind of all over the place right now as far as views. And, sometimes, like, for example, our Passport Bros,
yeah.
that has done really well for us being a new channel. And I think the reason that's done for us is because it's a solution.
It's a solution.
Right?
The entire episode is about a solution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
You're
that's
right.
just, getting so much traction compared to some of the other ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of where I'd like to kind of move forward as far as getting topics from our audience and also getting solutions and feedback about what we spoke about today.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, guys, please leave a comment. We are really interested to hear from you, and we would love to do more topics that are truly helpful. Also, remember to subscribe and watch the next recommended video. Thanks, guys.